Oh, that's right. Steel Path was meant to be, you know, like this difficult challenge or something, right? Ah, well, I guess not. It has been quite a long while since Steel Path was released, and we have finally completed it, because, you know, I'm lazy and stuff, but I decided that we would share some of the strategies and things that we have learned along our journey through Steel Path to help you make Steel Path as easy as possible. Before we move on, however, don't forget to hit that subscribe and notification bell down below. If you do enjoy the video, don't forget to leave it a like, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Now, when we all first started Steel Path, we genuinely assumed that it would be a walk in the park. DE has never really come out with anything difficult in the past, so there was nothing to make us think that maybe it might be a little bit difficult. But to a lot of our surprise and enjoyment, Steel Path actually provides a decent challenge, not an insane challenge, but enough that it makes you think about your loadout and your gear, and makes you plan out what you're taking into each mission. I know that I personally was not expecting any sort of challenge, but after completing the first few nodes, I realized that I actually needed to decide on certain frames and synergies to try and make it as easy as possible. A good example of this would be my Couverture, which we quite often use in videos and on stream. We decided to take that in because normally this thing can hit insanely high damage numbers. Took it into Steel Path, and within the first mission we realized that the Churker actually wasn't a good pick because it was just a high flat damage number and didn't have any good utility to it. But match that Churker with an Ash that can strip 100% armor and boom, you've got some easy insta-kills. And once we realized that we could do things like that, we started planning our builds and taking in certain frames and weapons. So today I'm going to show you the different strategies and synergies that we used to help us fly through Steel Path. Before we start, do know that any frame or weapon can do the job, and in fact it is a personal preference. However, these are the synergies that I felt made Steel Path the easiest and the easiest way to cheese through the missions as fast as possible. The way I went through Steel Path is I picked certain frames that I'd like to do for certain mission types, and then whenever I got to the next node, I'd look at the mission type and go, oh yes, I need to use this frame. So I'm going to provide you my frames that I liked using and what synergies I used with them, and along with which mission types that I used them for. So I guess let's start with the frame that I used for quite a large majority of missions, and that would be Ash. Now I picked Ash due to his seeking Shuriken's augment, which with the right amount of strength can mean 100% armor strip. And obviously due to the extra armor in Steel Path, this can be very important. Armor strip can make things a lot easier, and having a frame that does that for you can turn obviously normal weapons into much more effective ones. So the first type of loadout we took was Ash with a Couverture due to its high base damage, which isn't very effective in Steel Path, but when armor stripped by Ash can do a lot of work. We also took a Couver Nucore to prime enemies that may have been a little bit harder to deal with, and we also took our Plague Kripath, which wasn't for any specific reason, just the main melee that I like to use. On the screen you can see the Ash build. I'm not going to post the builds of every single weapon and frame as that will make the video take way too long, but I will provide links for every build of every weapon that I'm going to be talking about in this guide in the description, so just have a look down there and you should be able to find them. The general loop of this build was pretty simple. We took Ash, and a majority of the time we were invisible with our 2. Whenever we came across an enemy that we needed to kill, we'd use Ash's 1 to then 100% strip the armor with the build we have, and then shoot it with the Churker. Now any high base damage weapons will work here, and in fact most melee weapons will also work with this. However, I use the Churker purely because it's my favorite primary and I enjoy using it. We took this combo into certain missions such as Rescue, Capture, as well as Spy and Exterminate. I feel like that is pretty self-explanatory, but just to run through it, with Exterminate we use Ash's 1 to strip all the armor, and then we go through killing them with our melee or our Churker. In Spy missions, Ash's invisibility makes it very easy, and then for Capture and Rescue, Ash is decently quick, able to go invisible, and can strip armor off our capture targets to make it a little bit easier for us. Little post edit here, because I forgot to mention, we also used Ash for sabotage missions as well. Our second most used frame was surprisingly Vorben. Due to Vorben's easy CC, he makes a lot of objective based game modes very simple. So for Vorben's case, we actually used him for all survivals, mobile defense, and and defection mission. And obviously the reason being, with Vorben's 4 you can suck in all the enemies, and it makes the objectives very easy to defend. For the case of survival, it just made it very cheesy and easy. All you'd have to do was place Vorben's 4 down on the floor, and then just melee or shoot into it for the duration of the mission and extract. Nice and easy, just like that. Vorben's build should be on screen right now, and it's pretty simple, mostly all just going into duration and range, as that's all we really need it for. We're using Vorben's 4 obviously, and that's the only two things that really impact it. Along with Vorben, however, I would suggest taking in a high damage primary. In our case it's the Chakra again. A secondary good for priming, in our case it is the Kuvik Nucor, and then a high damage melee, which once again is a play Kripath for us, but if you want to take in anything else, they can work too. And for the loop of Vorben, it's pretty simple. For defection defense and mobile defense, get to the point where you need to defend, hold down 4, throw out that vortex, and then just lay into the enemies as they get sucked in. I also use Xeneric for this synergy, mainly because I seem to be struggling a little bit with energy from time to time, so Xeneric solved that issue for me as well. Another frame that actually became quite popular due to Steelpath was actually Nyx. However, we actually run Nyx a little bit different than most. A lot of people like to run Nyx for her armor strip, however, us personally, we ran Nyx for her chaos to help us with the interception game mode. If you have never tried Nyx on an interception game mode or anything with an objective, she trivializes content with her chaos, turning all enemies against each other and essentially making them completely ignore you. So with this build you see on screen, the whole goal was to completely trivialize the interceptions to make them so you can almost AFK. The whole idea is a lot of range, a lot of efficiency, a lot of duration, and all you need to do then is you cast it. You go and capture all 4 towers, you press 3, and every time they go to capture a tower, they start attacking each other instead of capturing it, making it pretty much an AFK mission. This completely trivializes every single interception in the star chart and makes it a lot easier to fly through the content. Now I'm sure this build you could tweak a little bit to make it a little bit better or a little bit more useful for other things as well. However, this was just a quick build. I didn't spend too much time on it, and it worked for us with what we needed it for. Now, for the assassination boss missions in the star chart, we decided to use Trinity. And the main reason for this is Trinity's 2 actually does true damage, and what that means is that it doesn't take into effect armor. And because armor is in fact one of the main reasons that makes these enemies more tanky, it means that she can trivialize every single boss, well, most of them, with ease really. The build for Trinity should be appearing on screen now, but the general loop for this build is pretty simple. All you need to do is go to the enemy and press 2 on it. Casting 2 will give you your quote-unquote EV, but at the same time will do a percentage health damage to the enemy. Because it's got a low duration, it should finish relatively quickly, and you spam it again. You keep going till the boss dies. Now there are some bosses that this does not work for, however for the majority of bosses you can take in Trinity and do this exact strategy. For the ones that don't work, I would suggest trying out Ash with the build and synergy that we showed earlier. Now that you've got all those frames and weapons prepared for all those other types of missions, there are a few types that we haven't talked about yet. First type to go off the list is free roam or bounty missions coming from Plains of Eidolon, Orb Velis, as well as the Cambrian Drift. These missions can all be trivialized quite easy with a Messer with heat or corrosive on the regulated. However, if you are struggling with that, you could always go back to the Ash build we used prior. It is a lot slower, however, it is a lot more safe. We also have Archwing missions. For most of the Archwing missions, I would suggest running an Itzel. Itzel has the ability to turn invisible and do quite a large amount of damage, so I would suggest running that. If Itzel isn't your style or you are still struggling, I would suggest running a Mesher, as a Mesher has all supportive and defensive based abilities. And the only other game mode that we haven't talked about so far is Excavation. Now in Excavation, I would actually suggest running a Limbo. Limbo's 4 and 2 combined make it very easy to defend targets like this, and also allow you to kill targets for those energy cores without being at risk of dying yourself. I don't have a build for Limbo currently to put up on screen, as I have changed it since I've run, but essentially you want medium range, good efficiency, and very high duration. And then the last thing on the list is actually the Junction Bosses to get in between planets. Now for this, I would actually take the Ash build that we suggested at the start. When you walk into a junction room, immediately press 2 to turn invisible, that way the Junction Boss will not target you. Press 1 to throw your Shuriken Stars, immediately stripping them of any armor, and then shoot them with a high damage weapon. I personally took the Chakra, however again any high damage melee will work for this too. And that's pretty much all. Obviously there are some other personal preference things such as the type of school you want to go with, Xeneric, Naramon, that kind of thing. I ran with Xeneric a lot of the time, however if you want to do a melee focused build, Naramon will work too. As for companions, it doesn't really matter. I took Smita along for a majority of it because a cat buff and some steel essence is nice and juicy. I would also suggest taking in a large amount of consumable items such as pads and specters. Specters actually make this very, very simple and trivialized and help you out a massive deal. For those that haven't tried specters before, I highly recommend doing so and at least giving them a shot with this. But overall, I think that's all the things you need to know to be able to trivialize and fly through this content. If you've got any questions about what I have talked about, feel free to leave a comment below and hopefully I'll be able to respond and help you out with any questions. If you are enjoying the content here, don't forget to go over and check out our Twitch channel over on twitch.tv/robostealth. That is going to be all for me today, however. Hope you enjoyed and I hope it helped you out. And until next time, Robo out.